The topic of today's speech will be the situation and status of minority languages within Europe. Language is a communication tool enabling humans to convey meaning and emotions, influence other people, and stay in touch. Moreover, it's an essential part of our identity and our cultural heritage. In the world today, it's estimated that there are around 6,000 different languages that contribute to a huge diversity of expression and a richness of culture all over the world. Language is a living experience of the people who use it. They learn it at home, at school, abroad, and they adapt it to the specific situations and circumstances of their lives. As a result of, for example, historical circumstances, some people speak one language at home and then maybe another at school or in the public sector. In fact, there is no clear-cut border between dialects and state or regional languages. But whatever linguistic positions on the issue there may be, a legal definition gives a language its status in a given country. Therefore, the definition of minority languages is a minefield to begin with different definitions existing at the European level and in different countries. To give a bit of background on language, the situation of languages in the world, a March 2003 study by UNESCO revealed a huge disproportion in the number of speakers of world languages. It shows an enormous degree of linguistic polarity. Around 97% of the world's population speak around 4% of the world's languages, mostly English, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Russian, and others, while only 3% speak the roughly 96% of remaining languages. This richness of human expression has been diminishing constantly due to economic, military, cultural, educational, or religious pressures. Speakers of languages exposed to such impacts may lose their interest in a language or even develop a negative attitude towards it, a stance that is often reinforced by the dominant language population. In post-World War II Europe, consideration for minority or regional languages or the recognition of linguistic rights was just not a priority. Before and during the war, some linguistic minorities participated in or were believed to have participated on the wrong side of the conflict. And at the same time, other linguistic minorities were targeted by extermination policies. Post-World War II Europe witnessed massive either voluntary or forced movements of populations across its territory, which permanently changed its linguistic landscape. To give some more information on the situation of minority languages in Europe, it's estimated that today between 40 and 50 million Europeans speak a minority language. The first step towards the recognition of these languages took place in 1981, when the Council of Europe adopted Recommendation 928 on the educational and cultural problems of minority languages and dialects in Europe. This text highlights linguistic identities as an element of the development of Europe as a whole and European ideas and culture, and put forward measures that were to be implemented. Among these measures were the use of original geographical names of a territory in its indigenous language, the use of dialects and mother tongues in education, particularly preschool and primary education, support for minority languages and their use in higher education and local media, among others. Continuing on the same path, the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages entered into force in 1998. The Charter focuses on the need to protect Europe's rich linguistic legacy, including its traditional regional and minority languages, known in the European institutions as RMLs, some of which are in danger of extinction if they are not both protected and promoted. However, it's worth noting that this legal instrument does not take into consideration the languages of newly arrived non-EU migrants who speak languages that are not traditionally spoken in Europe. This charter does not actually provide a specific list of regional minority languages or any specific requirements or definition for them, such as a percentage of speakers as a criteria for something to be a minority language. It is up to a state to decide which languages should be included, taking into account psychosociological and political aspects. Four major categories of minority languages are generally referred to in EU documentation. The first is known as autochtonous languages, which are languages that exist without official state language status. An example of this is Breton in France. The second category is autochtonous cross-border languages, which are pretty similar to the first category, except that they are used in multiple countries. For example, the Sami language, which is spoken by a minority in the north of Sweden and Finland. The third category encompasses national languages of one country that are spoken by a minority group living in another country. And there are quite a lot of examples of this in Europe. For example, Swedish in Finland, German in Poland, Romanian in Hungary, and many of these enclaves of minority language speakers can be dated back to the enormous population displacements that took place during and following the Second World War. Finally, there's a fourth category, which is non-territorial languages, which are not tied to any specific territory or country. An example of this is Romani, which is spoken by Romani gypsies throughout Europe and is not tied to any specific territory, although there are certain countries that have higher percentages of this minority. 5 European regional languages enjoy the status of a semi-official or co-official language, which means that they can be officially used in correspondence between the Council and a requesting member state. These 5 are Scottish Gaelic and Welsh in the United Kingdom, and Galician, Catalan, and Basque in Spain. So, of the many minority languages still spoken in Europe, which ones are most at risk? Well, the UNESCO Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger warns that 128 languages are endangered in Europe. Basque and Welsh are considered vulnerable. Kashubian, Scots, Breton, and Sami are considered severely endangered, while Livonian and Cornish are considered critically endangered. In fact, Livonian, spoken in Latvia, and Cornish, spoken in Cornwall in the UK, have no remaining native speakers, with the last native speaker of Cornish having died in 1777, and the last native speaker of Livonian having died in 2013. Despite this, efforts to revive a number of endangered languages are underway, both at the European and national levels. To take the example of Cornish, just to give you a bit more information, revival efforts began in the early 20th century with the publication of several books on the language and the proposal of a unified dialect and spelling system. However, over the course of the 20th century, things started to get a bit more complicated with the appearance of a number of competing dialects and writing systems, which led to confusion. The recognition of Cornish under the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages in 2012 led to the creation of a Cornish language partnership. This was an important step for the language, which resulted in a single spelling system and the creation of university courses and even a Cornish language immersion daycare for children. These measures appear to have had an effect, as according to the 2011 census, over 500 people listed Cornish to be their main language. And UNESCO updated the languages classification from extinct to critically endangered. Nevertheless, there remains much work to be done in this area, and it's unlikely that in the near future we will see Cornish achieve anything like the level of recognition and security of other minority languages, such as, for example, Catalan. So to conclude this speech, we have seen that work is being done and initiatives are being created at a number of levels to safeguard and revive Europe's minority languages, and in particular to promote early education for children that hopes to produce some more native speakers, particularly of extinct and very nearly extinct languages. However, the situation on the whole is dire, not just in Europe, but all over the world. It's estimated that on Earth, a language dies every 2 weeks. And to quote Charlemagne for a second, to possess another language is to possess another soul. So it's quite sad to think about how many unique perspectives and cultures we're losing every year. I hope this speech has been interesting to you and you've learned something new, and maybe you'll think twice about learning an endangered language. So thank you.